Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the Ryan Reynolds film Free Guy. So, this movie, I would say there are quite a few fun moments in this movie, but I honestly don't feel like the story is done all that well. You could tell that this is probably just a fun film, and, there are, of course, people that, of course, who are video game like people that will probably just really enjoy this film and really just like it. I think they do kind of go to the same well kind of multiple times, how you kind of consistently keep seeing like reactions of social media like people, YouTubers or Twitch players or whichever, uh like how we really go on in this movie, and there are some fun spots where there's kind of like, ooh, wow, that's cool that they added that, incorporated that in there. Ooh, so Fox and Disney are kind of having fun with some of their stuff. Ooh, that's kind of cool to see those kind of spots, and I'm sure everybody who likes any number of things is just gonna go like, ooh, that's fun to have that there. Um, but yeah, so going on in this movie, this movie to me has this kind of if anyone ever was to see the movie Short Circuit, it kind of feels like that, where you have all of a sudden um, this how do they call it? Um, I think they call it NPC or something like that. They call it like a Yeah, they call it a NPC. I'm trying to think of the word because I usually call it like a CPU or whatever like that. So we have an NPC who ends up deciding one day to come to life, and basically that's what this movie is to basically be about certain computered parts of a game all deciding to have a life of their own, and how eventually we just start to eventually having these computer things just start to fight against the system, and eventually it gets where there is no game to play, because eventually everyone is just defiant and everybody's just deciding like, no, I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm not going to go through and just get freaking run over, or I'm not going to get shot at or whatever. I'm not going to have my bank get robbed, because I'm just sick of this. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to just have my own kind of thing. We end up finding out we can tell the difference between the players and the non-players, and so I think that's kind of interesting, how we can easily come up with differences. But yeah, there's also kind of an interesting thing going on with the game developers of this movie, where they have their own mission within the game, which I think is interesting. But yeah, but other than that, there's really just like a video game date movie kind of going on in here. But yeah, so with that said, I think that's all that I almost have to say, cryptic sense, because really there's just there's probably, if I go any further into this, there might just be me just going into spoilers about whatever, because there's not much to say cryptically. So I think we'll just get into spoilers here. Let's get into spoilers about Free Guy, because otherwise, yeah, what a bunch of just there were some goofy actors in here, like Sean McLaughlin. What is that guy? I saw the credits and it was some Jacksepticeye. I don't know who the heck that is. There was also some guy named Ninja, and I was like, I don't even know who that is. Dan TDM, who are these people? I don't know who any of these people are in this movie. Good grief. These guys need to have, they need to have come up with better names than Jacksepticeye or... Man, they were flimsy with names in this movie. I'm joking. I know who these people are. I know they're big, fat, juicy, succulent YouTubers, and it's okay. But it just kind of feels like they went to the well of certain things way too often. within this movie to just keep like having to have certain gamer reactions in this film, which I just didn't like because like okay, there's only so many times you could do this, but like I could see also where like people could really have fun with going through this movie and just kind of like, oh man, so many Easter eggs because like Deadpool. If Deadpool will tell you anything, like I guess Ryan Reynolds movies just love to have Easter eggs in them, and so let's go into that double fived. If I haven't already, let's just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we can spoil this movie. So, very beginning of this film, we have just this repetitious moment going on here where we have a guy who is to go and get the same old coffee. Whether he likes it or not, he's just going to get the same kind of coffee, whether he asks for something alternate or whatever. So, what ends up happening seemingly every single day is Ryan Reynolds' character, who is just called Guy, and then eventually they end up calling him like Blue Shirt Guy. What a weird, goofy thing that was. So, Guy is to be this bank teller, and so he's at this bank that gets robbed every single day. And so, like, it kind of seems like we're going through this through a perspective of this not seeming like a video game, and then it eventually gives you that video game like understanding of it. It's like, oh, okay, so like at first you're just thinking that this is just a like a 007 James Bond crazy world that they live in, but then eventually you'll find out no, it's an actual video game, and you're like, oh, okay, because every single player is to supposedly have sunglasses, and that's how you can tell them apart from the NPCs. So, what eventually happens is we have eventually one time where Guy is talking to the security guard and mentioning that he's fantasizing about some woman, some player that's in this game, and he can't like not think about her. And so that coincidentally happens to be Molotov girl. I don't remember what her name was. Millie, whoever Millie is, the main character who's seems to be focusing with Guy. So eventually what ends up happening is Guy is to end up going and seeing Millie, and the more he sees her, the more he realizes that, you know what, like I want to not do what I do every day. Like I don't want to get the same old coffee. Like he gets to the point where he asks the barista, it's like, "Hey, how about I get a cappuccino?" And the girl is like, "No." Like you're going to get this one kind of coffee and that's all you're going to get. And so like he's like, "Well, why can't I just get a cappuccino?" And then everybody's like freaking out, so like he's not getting what he usually orders. Like but everybody just doesn't have everybody, like Ryan is just like, no, I'll take this coffee. Tastes like heaven. And so eventually Guy is to talk to the security guard and mention, it's like, you know what, like how can I be like this one woman, or how can I get close to this one woman who's Millie? And so the security guard is just like, well, like you can't because she wears sunglasses, and so you can't do that because you like aren't the sunglass wearers. And Guy is like, well, what if I can be? Like, can I just take a pair of sunglasses from anybody? And so all of a sudden we have this bank robber who robs the bank. We have the manager who's like, "Hey everybody, just take it easy. Like, no one be any heroes." And this guy does this like all the time. So Guy just decides to take this, like, it looks like a male character, but it sounds like a 12-year-old girl or whatever. So Guy goes and takes the sunglasses off of this player. The player is to just like have her like sister next to her, like telling her, "Hey, you should just kill this guy. You should just shoot him." And so all of a sudden we have Guy who ends up taking these sunglasses, and then he ends up going and realizing, oh my god, he's seeing the whole world through a different lens. He's realizing that this is a world that is to be called Free City, and that eventually like there's all these like settings and like all these like logos that tells people like what things are. Like one part is a garage shop, one is a food place, one place is clothing, blah 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 blah. So we also have a spot where like Ryan is to eventually see this one guy who is to have these sunglasses, and he's to like jump into this car with this woman, and like that's the spot to tell us it's like, well, hey, like that woman isn't actually his wife, and that car isn't actually his, and like blah blah blah. and so uh and so how we just kind of play this out is we have these guys that consistently have this thing of saying it's like, well, don't have a good day, have a great day. And so that seems to be their like slogans to tell everybody like that's their programmable thing, to the point where eventually Millie is to be like, oh yeah, don't have a good day, or don't have a good day, just have a great day. And then like Guy is like, hey, like talking to Millie and trying to get her attention, and all of a sudden eventually Millie just disappears because she disconnects, and then we can see what she really looks like. So eventually Guy is to eventually get sunglasses and eventually see the world like players do. And so all of a sudden he's just kind of like hacking through the game, going and racking so many levels that no one else is. And so everybody's like, who is this player? Who is this guy? It seems like he's uh like doing so much better than everyone else is. How is this possible? Ba 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 ba. So what ends up happening is the game creators think that this guy is just some player who is hacking, and so we have these two guys who end up going in. Um, Mouser and Keys end up going in to try to follow this player and tell them like, hey man, like disconnect so that way they can ban him forever, like whoever this player is. They want to try to get his username, or they want to be able to try to like figure out who he is, but they can't. So what they end up doing is, so Keys ends up dressing like a cop, and Mouser ends up dressing like this bunny cop that just like looks really funny and really fun. So these cops go after Guy, telling him that they're gonna consistently try to kill him until he logs out, and then they're gonna ban him forever. So Guy is just trying to run from this and hide away from this, and coincidentally, Guy ending up getting so much money from this game, ended up getting these like unique shoes where he can bizarrely like bounce really high, and so that's what he uses to try to escape from these cops. And eventually the cops turn on God mode so they can be able to not have to like try extremely hard to get to this guy. So they like try to like create this whole thing for them to like be able to get to him and try to get to him quickly. But eventually he ends up like jumping from this building to this bottom of this ground, and he ends up bizarrely having uh these like airbag kind of things like all around his body, and he smacks into the ground, and then he just rolls, and like so he's like safe. So these guys just can't catch him. So Guy just continues to like collect dollars and freaking has like 300,000 or whatever in the bank. He ends up like doing uh like things like shoot a lot of other players because like he's kind of annoyed with them, uh, and so on and so forth. And so eventually, Guy is even wanting to push the security guy to eventually get glasses himself so he can see the world like he does. And the security guard is like, "No, man, like I can't do that. Like I just can't." So eventually what ends up happening is we have Millie, who is to try to get into the game for a specific reason, because she is to like get this intel from this guy who is to tell her that there is some secret mission to eventually get this videotape. And so Keys is to eventually help Millie because they work together, because they're programmers of this game. And so Millie's trying to go into the game to get a certain kind of video that showcases the part of land in the game that was originally done by both Millie and Keys to show that this game originally was like crafted or put together by them. And because this guy who is Anton, who is the actual like seemingly owner of this free city game, there's a lawsuit between him and them basically saying who actually is to be the real true legitimate owner of this game or not. And there's this whole secret location in the map that showcases clear as day that both Millie and Keys were the first ones to actually do this game. And we end up finding out somewhere later that it's in like the water of this bridge. So eventually what ends up happening is Guy is to eventually when Millie is to make her way into this like hidden spot to try to get this video, she ends up getting into a spot where there's these consistent spawner of characters. And so all of a sudden we just see Guy rushing in with some motorcycle, taking a lot of these guys out, and eventually helping Millie out. So all of a sudden Millie's like, "Oh my god, thank god this guy's here." And so we have Millie who's telling Keys, it's like, well, hey, like, because Millie just thinks he's another player, but that's not the truth. So Millie is to say, like, okay, well, like, Keys, scan the room and be able to, like, figure out how we can, how me and this other player can, like, take these guys down. And Keys is like, what other player? The only player that's in that room is you. And so Millie's like, oh my god, like, this guy is, like, she thought he was a player, but I guess he's not a player. So eventually we get this guy who is to be Channing Tatum, and he's just to be some avatar of this gamer who ends up coming in here and is to... No, wait, that happens later because I think Ryan Reynolds' character has to come back. Yeah, I think he has to come back. So, yeah, because he doesn't get the video then, he gets the video later. So Ryan Reynolds gets the video later, and then that's when he bumps into Channing Tatum, the guy that originally did that video that was to show that secret piece of land. There we go. I'm trying to think of what all happens here, because they kind of go to the same spots twice. So eventually Millie is to like know where this spot is, but eventually she's kind of confused about this like PC, and so eventually what ends up happening is like Anton is just to like mention how like Guy is like this great player, he's going viral, everybody's talking about him, ba 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 ba. So Anton is deciding, like, well, yeah, when we, like, do Free City 2, like, we'll just make Guy just this muscular hunk of a man and whatever. And so we'll make him this like outlandish of a person, so no one will probably like him in the second game. So Anton eventually, who is to kind of figure out what people are doing, eventually Anton is wanting to like disconnect the game and like make it so that there's probably maintenance, or figure out some way to eventually try and take the game offline completely, because eventually Free City 2 evidently is not making enough money anymore, because everybody is just so excited about Free City that they're like, well, why should I have to go and buy the new latest thing when this game is so much fun? So what ends up happening is eventually, because they try to uh, excuse me, because eventually Anton eventually finds out what Millie's doing, and so he ends up purposely disconnecting the game just so Millie won't be able to get to the video. Because eventually, when Guy does give her the video after they spend some time together going and eating ice cream, bubblegum ice cream, and it seems that every bit of every favorite thing that Guy is to like is the exact same thing that Millie likes. Because we end up finding out that Keys had like programmed this one character into this game who is to respond to seeing Millie, because and have a crush on her, because Keys programmed that into the game because he actually really likes Millie, and so on and so forth. So eventually what ends up happening is so Millie gets the video and Anton disconnects the game, and all of a sudden it's deciding like, well, hey, like, I'm going to restart this whole game so that way like Guy doesn't have this information in this video and everything's like restarted again, and we don't have this guy that's like running amok because this NPC, like, he's getting like too big for like this game and whatever have you. So let me pause here for a second. All right. So eventually what ends up happening is that really there is seemingly nothing that they can do to stop Guy from remembering everything. Because every time Millie is to get back to the game, that's what kind of resets Guy to his previous thing. Even though they completely wipe the game and everything, Guy just still comes back to see Millie and remember who he was. And so eventually what they plan to do is eventually Guy is to want to control the NPCs to force them to have free will, and to force them to not want to be part of the game anymore, and to basically just do a walkout or be on strike because they don't want to get hit with cars anymore or whatever. But eventually it's kind of fun, all these spots where eventually people are to get hurt and whatever, because they just treat it like, oh man, just another day in the life. Like, man, I hate Mondays. Yeah, me too. Like, every like single moment where somebody's just to get creamed or like blown through a window, it's just like, hey man, just normal day, and then Free City. Yeah, isn't it? So like, I love the just non-reaction of everybody who's just be like, hey guys, hey, like, just like whatever's going on. So, so yeah, what ends up happening is we eventually have the NPC strike to where like the whole town of Free City is just dead, to where everybody's like, man, what could I do? And so eventually what they end up deciding to do is Millie and Guy are to make their way across this bridge to find this one original spot. And so what Anton does is he decides like, oh well, I'm gonna kill all the players, like so that way none of them get to respawn, and like I'm gonna push this game to the extreme, and I'm also just gonna kill a lot of things off, and so on and so forth. So it gets to the point where they release out this thing called Dude, which is basically Ryan Reynolds as this usually muscular man, and so we put this character out here to fight Ryan Reynolds. There's the one spot where we have this like where we have Ryan who ends up going and touching this glowing like med kit, and then he like because he had a busted nose, and then he ends up touching the med kit, and he's like, "Oh my god, I feel like a brand new guy," and then he's like, like he feels like at the top of his world. So, so but yeah, but we don't have that here. So what eventually happens is Guy is fighting off Dude, and like he's just kind of like the security guy also gets in the way, and so this security guard gets like picked up and then chucked, and then we have the security guard that's like, man, like this guy's strong, and he's like touching on his pecs, and he's like, man, like he punches so hard, but his hands are so soft, and like this guy is like just really creepy in all honesty. So what eventually ends up happening is this guy has this like killing blow of a punch that what ends up happening is all of a sudden we have Guy who ends up having this Captain America shield and has this like Hulk punch that he ends up punching Guy, and so we have all of a sudden like Chris Evans who's like, what the fuck? Like, bizarrely Chris Evans, a wild Chris Evans in the wild. And so all of a sudden, like, we have these moments of just these like properties that are just getting chucked in here, and Guy all of a sudden has this lightsaber, and everybody's like, whoa, does Guy have a lightsaber? And so yeah, so Guy is just hitting Dude with these like this lightsaber, and like I think this like Fortnite like weapon, and all this stuff, all these properties from whatever. And so like we just have Guy like eventually taking this thing down, but eventually Dude still like grabs and still takes down Guy to the point of him going and taking his glasses, like his gamer glasses, and giving them to Dude, to where all of a sudden Dude is like, oh, what a world. And so Dude is like scrambling around and touching all these little pieces and all these little things. And so that leaves Guy wide open to making his way to this bridge still. And so Anton decides that he's going to be scrambling and just going into all the servers and taking an axe to all the servers, so that way it'll basically kill every bit of every part of the game. And so that leads to like the whole game, like everything is just dying off. And so we have Mauser, who ends up not wanting to tell Anton what specific server it is to wipe out this one piece of game. And so what ends up happening is both the security guard and Guy are making their way through this bridge, and eventually there's this gap. And so Guy has to make it on to this one spot of land, and like Mouse is just like, hey man, like I'm not afraid anymore, like whatever happens happens. And so Guy runs off to make it to, and bizarrely Mariah Carey's song is playing for whatever reason. I guess like that music might cost a lot of money, I don't know. So like there's some reasoning for this Mariah Carey song. I think it was maybe quite possibly Millie's favorite song, I don't know. So Guy makes it all the way to the land, this spot of land, And he's like, yeah, like I did it. Like I don't know what I'm here for, but I did it. Torrid shows in game this spot, and so Millie's like, Anton, you're too late. Like we're gonna win this lawsuit against you because we found the spot. We found the spot that's in the game that tells that we were the very first ones to put this whole thing together. And so Anton is like, well, that's great and all, but I can still crush the server that kills Guy. And so Millie makes an offer to Anton to just own the free Guy game, and that Anton can do whatever the heck else he wanted. If he does Free City 2, 3, 4, 5 billion, she doesn't care, but she just wants to keep this one game. And Anton's like, are you serious? Like, that seems kind of dumb. Like, that's probably a huge mistake. But so what ends up happening is they end up keeping the game, and then all of a sudden you just start to see like the world just going to in this game, kinda like all of a sudden you just see these random things all over the place. You just see dinosaurs and just all this randomness, but it just seems that a lot of people just bizarrely just love this game for how random it's getting, and just how they just continue to incorporate things that just don't make any sense anymore. But so eventually what ends up happening is that supposedly no one is to buy any of the other free cities. So Anton just goes bankrupt because he's like, oh no, like, I'm the villain of this movie. Oh no, nobody's going to buy my stuff because I'm the villain. And so we just start seeing that like Millie and Mauser and Keys all have their like their little company that is still running Free City. So eventually what ends up happening is that Keys ends up going out, and eventually Guys to convince Millie that she should probably just go with Keys instead of like daydreaming about the perfect guy. Maybe she should go after Keys. So eventually Millie and Keys eventually go out together and probably get married and babies and whatever. And so eventually we have Guy, and we have Dude just kind of like having this moment, and eventually like Guy is having this moment with this security guard, and like basically that's how this movie just kind of ends, with these like goofy moments. But anyways, yeah, like that's all that really happens towards the bulk of this movie. So with that said, yeah, it was a fun movie, but yeah, it was just like the story kind of felt weak, but there were some fun things, Easter eggs, Chris Evans, Jacksepticeye, goofy people all over the place. But with that said, I think I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.